There's a certain kind of quiet disappearance that doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't come with slammed doors or dramatic endings. It doesn't arrive with heartbreak songs or tear-stained pillows. It slips in subtly, softly, almost politely. So politely, in fact, that most women don't notice it until years later, when something inside them whispers, "Where did I go?" It usually begins innocently. Maybe you cancel a dinner with your friends because he had a rough day and needs you. Or you change your outfit because he casually mentions he prefers something else. Maybe you stop sharing your opinions during conversations with his friends, afraid you'll embarrass him. You tell yourself these are small acts of love, harmless compromises, the normal adjustments people make when they care about someone. And they are, until they become a pattern that replaces your own voice with silence. The disappearing act rarely announces itself. It hides beneath phrases like, "It's not a big deal," or "I just want to keep the peace," or "I don't want to be too much." But peace built on self-erasure is never real peace. And shrinking yourself enough times eventually becomes a habit your nervous system accepts as survival. Some women describe it like slowly fading out of a photograph. The world around them stays sharp and defined. His needs, his moods, his priorities, his future, while their own edges blur. Others say it feels like living life in a low-volume version of themselves, as if the dimmer switch has been turned down one notch at a time. If you've ever paused and felt a strange distance between the life you're living and the woman you thought you'd become, you're not alone. This quiet vanishing is something women across generations, cultures, and backgrounds experience. And no, you are not weak, clingy, or overly emotional for slipping into it. There are reasons this happens. Reasons that live deep in your early conditioning, your attachment patterns, and the stories the world taught you to believe about what love should require. It often begins long before your first relationship. For many women, childhood taught them that love is earned through compliance. Perhaps affection was inconsistent, coming in waves depending on whether you behaved, stayed quiet, or anticipated someone else's emotional weather. You learned to scan faces for approval, to step lightly, to soothe conflict before conflict even had a chance to breathe. Somewhere inside that childhood version of you, a belief quietly took root. My worthiness depends on how well I keep others comfortable. And so you grew into a woman who became very good at attuning to everyone else's needs, while losing touch with her own. In psychology, we call this an anxious attachment pattern. Not because you're broken, but because you learned early that closeness was unpredictable, and you must work for it. It's no surprise then that when you enter a relationship, your instinct is to shapeshift, to please, to avoid being abandoned at any cost. And ironically, this fear of abandonment often becomes the very thing that causes the slow abandonment of yourself. But it isn't only personal history that shapes this. Society has always handed women a script that reads like a quiet poison. Be accommodating, be nurturing, be selfless. Movies and music celebrate women who sacrifice everything for love, who fix broken men, who put their own needs last. We hear it in the praise girls receive. She's so mature, which often really means she doesn't complain. She's so easygoing, which often means she doesn't ask for much. She's so supportive, which often means she puts everyone else before herself. And so, without noticing, you begin to internalize that your value lies not in who you are, but in how well you can orbit someone else. But here's the truth. Real love doesn't require self-abandonment. The kind of connection you crave is impossible to build on the foundation of silence. A relationship cannot be the place where you go to disappear. It must be the place where you go to expand. Before you can rebuild that, though, you first have to recognize the difference between healthy compromise and the kind of compromise that hollows you out. Healthy compromise still leaves you feeling like you. It invites both partners to lean in, to stretch, to meet in the middle without losing ground. Self-abandonment, on the other hand, feels like walking a little farther away from yourself every day. It feels like swallowing words that matter, shrinking needs that are valid, dimming passions that once made your world feel alive. Most women only realize something is wrong when the symptoms become impossible to ignore. Maybe you wake up one morning and feel strangely disconnected from your life, like you're performing a role someone else wrote for you. Maybe you catch yourself asking your partner what you want for dinner because you genuinely don't know anymore. Maybe you look in the mirror and search your own face for signs of the person you used to be. And beneath all of this is a quiet grief. A grief for the parts of you that have been shelved, softened, or silenced. But nothing is lost forever. The woman you were is not gone. She is waiting. She is patient, and she is persistent. She leaves clues everywhere, in the hobbies you abandoned, in the opinions you stopped expressing, in the friends you drifted away from, in the dreams you labeled unrealistic. She has been whispering to you in the moments when your chest tightens for reasons you can't explain, when your body feels heavier than your mind will admit, when a small voice inside says, "This isn't me." This moment, this recognition is where the real journey begins. Because you cannot reclaim yourself until you see the ways you've disappeared. And you cannot rebuild a relationship until you rebuild the relationship with your own sense of self. The disappearing act is not your fault. It is a pattern your nervous system learned to survive. But survival is not the same as living. And if you've made it this far into this reflection, it's because some part of you is ready to come home, ready to be seen, ready to exist fully again. There is a moment, usually quiet and unplanned, when a woman realizes she has been living on the surface of her own life. It might happen while washing dishes, or driving home, or staring at a blank TV screen after a long evening. A strange ache rises in the chest, not quite sadness, not quite anger, something more like homesickness. But the home you're missing isn't a place, it's yourself. Before you can change anything in your relationship, before you can set boundaries or rebuild trust, you have to meet the woman underneath all the roles, expectations, and years of self-silencing. And that woman will not return with force. She won't knock down the door and announce, "I'm back." She will come to you only when you slow down enough to hear her. When you stop asking, "What does he need?" long enough to ask a quieter, more difficult question. "What do I feel?" Reclaiming your inner world is not a quick fix. It's an excavation. Imagine a vast field where an ancient city once stood. Your passions, your instincts, your desires, your sense of self. Over the years, sand has blown across it, covering the structures, burying the walls, hiding the beauty beneath layers of dust. But nothing is gone. It's just buried. And now, slowly and gently, you begin brushing the layers away. For many women, the first shock comes when they realize how disconnected they are from their own emotions. Not the dramatic ones, those tend to leak out in tears at night, or irritability when overwhelmed. No, it's the subtle ones. The tug in your stomach when something feels wrong. The spark of interest you override with logic. The pang of resentment you swallow before forming words. When you've spent years prioritizing someone else's emotional landscape, your own becomes unfamiliar, even foreign. So the work begins with the simplest question, one most people never ask themselves honestly. What am I feeling right now? It sounds basic, but for a woman who has spent her adult life shape-shifting to avoid conflict or disapproval, this question can feel strangely intimidating. Sometimes the first answer is silence. Sometimes it's numbness. Sometimes it's a single word like tired, even when you suspect there's something deeper underneath. This is why the practice of checking in with yourself matters, not as a self-help trick, but as a way of slowly rebuilding fluency in your own emotional language. You pause, breathe, and listen. Not for what you should feel, or what your partner wants you to feel, but for what is actually there. And at first it may feel like listening to static. But with time, the static begins to separate into signals. A tightness in your chest might be anxiety. A heaviness in your stomach might be guilt. A buzzing under your skin might be excitement you've long ignored. These small recognitions are the first brushstrokes of rediscovery. And then you go deeper, not into the present, but backward. Before the relationship, before the responsibilities, before the expectations, before you learn to be pleasing. There was a younger version of you, a girl who knew exactly what she loved, what she hated, what felt right, what felt wrong. She did not second-guess her instincts. She didn't shrink to make anyone comfortable. She sang too loudly, drew unevenly, asked endless questions, wore mismatched clothes without shame, and loved things simply because they made her feel alive. Most women don't realize how much of that girl they've abandoned. But she is still there, waiting. Sometimes she shows up in odd moments, like when you walk past a bookstore and suddenly want to buy 3 novels you'll convince yourself you don't have time for. Or when you're invited to an event and feel the old spark of excitement before instantly smothering it with thoughts of schedules and guilt. Or when a memory surfaces, uninvited, of something you loved doing years ago and never admitted how much you missed it. This is where journaling becomes less of a technique and more of a doorway. Not the kind of journaling that tracks what you did that day or lists errands for tomorrow. This is soul journaling. You put pen to paper and ask yourself questions no one has asked you in years. What used to light me up? What did I dream about before I started rearranging myself around other people's dreams? What parts of me have I hidden because they felt inconvenient for the relationship I was in? What small voice inside me have I been silencing? And what has it been trying to say? You don't have to force answers. You simply write what comes up. Fragments, images, memories, feelings. At first, it might feel awkward, even childish, but that awkwardness is a sign that you're touching parts of yourself you haven't visited in a long time. And somewhere along this path, you meet her, the buried woman, the one you used to be before life asked you to compromise her away. Sometimes she appears through a forgotten hobby, sometimes through a sudden craving for solitude, sometimes through an emotion you can no longer pretend isn't there, sometimes through a moment of anger that wakes you up, reminding you that your boundaries were crossed long before you admitted it. Reconnecting with this inner self can stir grief for the years you spent muting her, grief for the dreams you postponed, grief for the choices you made from fear instead of truth. But alongside that grief is a profound, unexpected relief. Because meeting her again means you are no longer lost. You are no longer invisible to yourself. You can finally see the outlines of your own identity beneath the dust. And here's the most important part. The moment you reconnect with your inner world, you also begin to understand what your relationship has been built on. Not what you thought you needed, but what you were afraid to lose. You finally see what sacrifices were healthy and what sacrifices hollowed you out. You begin to feel the difference between love and self-erasure. Before you move into rebuilding trust, before you set boundaries, before you redefine the relationship, you must reclaim this foundation. Otherwise, everything you rebuild will be constructed on shaky ground, on the remnants of a version of you that never had the chance to choose fully, freely, and consciously. There comes a turning point in every woman's journey of reclaiming herself. It's subtle but unmistakable. The moment you realize that meeting the woman you lost is not enough. You can find her, recognize her, even feel her stirring awake inside you, yet still not know how to protect her. Still not know how to choose her. Still not know how to stay with her when old patterns rise like ghosts pulling you backward. Rediscovery without self-trust is like finding a buried treasure and leaving it uncovered, hoping no one takes it. Without rebuilding trust in yourself, the old reflexes return. The reflex to doubt your feelings. The reflex to silence your needs. The reflex to prioritize peace over truth. The reflex to negotiate with your own intuition until it collapses under the weight of someone else's comfort. This is why self-trust is not a luxury. It is the foundation for every other change you want to make. If self-abandonment was the wound, then self-trust is the medicine. And building it back is not dramatic or glamorous. It rarely looks like a grand declaration or a sudden breakthrough. It looks smaller, quieter. It looks like tiny moments where you decide, even when it's uncomfortable, to stand with yourself instead of against yourself. Most women who lose themselves in love didn't grow up trusting their inner voice. Some had parents who minimized their feelings, who told them they were overreacting or too sensitive. Others learned early that expressing needs led to punishment, guilt, or withdrawal from the very people they depended on. And so the mind learned to override the body. Logic learned to silence intuition. Safety became tied to compliance, not authenticity. As adults, this shows up in ways that feel painfully familiar. You sense something is off, but immediately talk yourself out of it. You feel a boundary being crossed, but dismiss it as not a big deal. You notice resentment bubbling, but swallow it before it reaches your lips. Each time this happens, you reinforce a silent belief. I cannot trust myself. My feelings aren't reliable. My needs are negotiable. And over time, this belief becomes the blueprint for every relationship you enter. Rebuilding self-trust requires something many women are not used to giving themselves. Consistency, the kind that doesn't depend on motivation or mood or whether someone approves. It is the consistency of small promises kept over and over, not because anyone is watching, not because you'll be rewarded, but because you matter enough to keep your word to yourself. The first step is microscopic. You choose one tiny promise each day, something so achievable it almost feels silly. Drink a full glass of water before your morning coffee. Step outside for 5 minutes of fresh air. Put your phone down during lunch. Go to bed 10 minutes earlier than usual. These aren't self-improvement goals, they are trust-building rituals. You're teaching your nervous system, through gentle repetition, that when you say you will do something, you mean it. That you are someone you can count on. At first, it feels awkward. You may even resist it. A part of you, usually the part conditioned to serve others first, will whisper that these small acts are pointless, childish, or selfish. Ignore that voice. That voice is the leftover echo of a life where your needs didn't matter. You're building a new life where they do. But self-trust isn't only built in what you do, it's also built in what you listen to. And this is where intuition returns to the story. For women who have spent years prioritizing external approval, intuition often feels like a troublesome guest, an inconvenience, something to rationalize away. Maybe your gut tightens when someone dismisses your feelings. Maybe your chest contracts when a boundary is crossed. Maybe you feel a subtle heaviness after spending time with someone who drains you. These sensations are your inner compass. They speak long before your mind has formed a sentence. But when you've spent years ignoring them, they show up weaker, quieter, unsure whether you want to hear them. So rebuilding intuition begins with something simple: acknowledgement. You don't have to act on the feeling right away. You just have to admit it's there. You might even write it down, creating a record of moments where your body spoke before your mind argued back. Over time, you begin to see a pattern. Your intuition was never wrong. You simply learned to mistrust it. But even as you do this work, something deeper will happen. Your body may react. Saying no, noticing discomfort, or choosing yourself will activate old survival instincts. Your heart may race, your hands may shake, your stomach may clench. This isn't weakness, it's physiology. When you've been conditioned to survive through compliance, self-advocacy feels dangerous, even when it isn't. This is why nervous system regulation becomes essential. Think of it as emotional first aid. When your body panics because you're practicing a new way of being, you breathe slowly. You ground your feet into the floor. You soften your jaw. You remind yourself out loud, it is safe for me to choose myself. It is safe for me to disappoint someone. I am not in danger. This may sound small, but it's the difference between reverting to your old patterns and staying present long enough to build new ones. And something beautiful begins to happen when you do this consistently. You start to feel a quiet shift inside you, a growing steadiness, a sense that you're no longer at the mercy of someone else's mood or approval. You begin to trust that your needs are not unreasonable, that your boundaries are not burdens, that your inner voice is not an enemy but a guide. Women often expect this shift to feel like empowerment, but more often it feels like relief, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. It feels like discovering that you have a spine, not just metaphorically, but physically. You feel straighter, taller, more grounded. You speak a little more slowly, but with more certainty. You stop explaining yourself so much. You stop apologizing for things that don't require apology. You learn to pause before agreeing to something. You learn to notice resentment before it explodes. You learn to sit with discomfort instead of abandoning yourself to escape it. This is the moment where the world inside you begins to reorganize. And as you rebuild trust with yourself, something profound shifts in your relationships too. You stop choosing people out of fear. You stop staying out of obligation. You stop negotiating your worth in exchange for closeness. You stop mistaking anxiety for chemistry. And for the first time, perhaps in your entire life, you begin to choose connections that feel safe for your nervous system instead of familiar to your wounds. Rebuilding self-trust is not a destination. It's a relationship you nurture every day. One tiny promise, one quiet boundary, one honest emotion at a time. And as this internal foundation strengthens, You prepare for the next stage of transformation, learning how to set boundaries with grace, clarity, and courage, not as a weapon, but as a form of love. There's a moment in every woman's healing journey when insight isn't enough anymore. You've rediscovered parts of yourself you thought you lost. You've started rebuilding trust in your own voice, your own instincts, your own inner world. And now comes the part that feels the most daunting, the most unnatural, the most terrifying. Letting the outside world meet the new you. This is where boundaries come in, not as rules, walls, or ultimatums, but as the quiet architecture of self-respect. Boundaries are the moment your inner work becomes external. They are the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. And for a woman who has lived a lifetime of self-abandonment, boundaries don't feel empowering at first. They feel dangerous. They feel like doing something wrong. Because for years, your safety depended on being agreeable, compliant, easy to love, easy to handle, easy to understand. When that's been your survival strategy, the simple act of saying, "I don't like that," or "I need space," or "that doesn't work for me," can make your nervous system panic. It feels like stepping off a cliff with no guarantee you'll land anywhere safe. But here's the truth no one teaches you. Boundaries are not an act of aggression. They are an act of clarity. And clarity is kindness. Kind to you. Kind to the people who love you. Kind to the future you are trying to build. The first challenge isn't the boundary itself. It's the emotional earthquake underneath it. When you've spent years putting everyone else's comfort above your own, discomfort becomes a trigger. Your heart races, your throat tightens. A voice inside whispers, "Don't make a fuss. Don't upset him. Don't ruin the moment." You start predicting reactions before you even speak. You imagine disappointment, anger, silence, withdrawal. You rehearse arguments in your head, trying to find the version of the sentence that will offend the least, even if it means betraying yourself again. This is where you pause. You breathe, and you remind yourself, discomfort is not danger. Conflict is not catastrophe. Letting someone down is not the same as being abandoned. Saying no, or even just saying the truth, doesn't mean you're rejecting the relationship. It means you're showing up in it. But here's the part most people overlook. Boundaries don't begin with what you say to others. They begin with the conversations you have with yourself. You cannot set a boundary if you're not sure you're allowed to have needs in the first place. You cannot speak clearly when you haven't yet admitted to yourself what is hurting you. You cannot protect a truth you haven't named. And once you do name it, the world around you shifts. When you finally speak your needs aloud, even gently, you begin to notice the dynamic between you and your partner with new eyes. Things you once tolerated now sting. Jokes you laughed off now hurt. Resources you carried without question suddenly feel heavy. Places where his convenience mattered more than your comfort stand out in sharp relief. This isn't because he has changed. It's because you are no longer numb. So how do you begin to communicate this new clarity without igniting chaos? You start with honesty. Honesty about your own transformation, not his behavior. You sit down with him, not in a moment of tension, but in a moment of calm. And you let him into your process. It might sound something like, "I've been noticing how often I silence myself without meaning to. I'm learning how to stop doing that. It might feel different for a while, but it's important to me. I want us to grow with this, not against it." For many partners, this conversation opens a door. For others, it triggers insecurity. And for some, it exposes dynamics they didn't realize were there. His reaction is not a judgment of your worth. It is simply information. But even if he supports you wholeheartedly, boundaries still feel awkward at first. You're not used to the sound of your own voice asking for what you need. You're not used to the sensation of taking up space without apologizing. The first few times you say no, your body might shake. Your voice might tremble. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're rewiring years of conditioning. And here is the part that truly matters. A boundary is not a sentence you recite. It is a line you uphold. It is not defined by how someone reacts. It is defined by what you do after you've expressed it. If your partner forgets or pushes or reacts emotionally, the boundary does not dissolve. This is where you learn to repeat yourself with calm steadiness. This is where you learn to stay grounded while someone else has their feelings. This is where you learn that you don't have to collapse or explain yourself into exhaustion. There will be moments of friction. There will be moments where you're tempted to shrink again because the old dynamic is familiar, and the new one feels like wearing clothing that doesn't quite fit yet. There will be moments where you feel guilty for simply being honest. Women often confuse guilt with wrongdoing, when in truth, the guilt is just the residue of a lifetime of people-pleasing. But stay with yourself. Let the discomfort pass through you. This is the price of transformation, and it's worth paying. Something remarkable happens as you continue to practice this. The relationship either evolves into a healthier, more balanced partnership, or it doesn't. And that clarity is a gift. Boundaries don't ruin healthy relationships. They reveal and strengthen them. They create space for mutual respect, for authentic connection, for emotional safety. They allow two people to meet each other as adults, not as caretaker and dependent, not as controller and pleaser, not as rescuer and rescued. You'll begin to notice changes inside yourself, too. Conversations become easier. Your body no longer braces as often. You don't swallow resentment. You don't sit awake replaying moments where you stayed silent. You don't feel invisible. You no longer rely on your partner's moods to determine your worth. You begin to feel the solid ground beneath your own feet. And that ground will be essential for the next chapter of your healing. The chapter where relationships stop being a place of fusion and fear and start becoming a place of expansion and mutual growth. Because once you learn to hold your boundaries with grace, the question naturally arises. If you can remain whole, what kind of love becomes possible? There is a certain kind of quiet power that awakens in a woman once she learns to hold her boundaries. Not the loud kind, not the kind that demands attention or shakes the earth, but the grounded, steady kind that grows roots beneath her feet. And it's from this rootedness that a new question rises. If I no longer disappear in love, then what kind of love do I actually want? Most women who have lived through self-abandonment have only ever known two ways of being in relationships. The first is codependence, the slow merging of selves until there is no oxygen left. The second is extreme independence, the emotional fortress you build after being hurt one too many times. Neither feels satisfying. One chokes you, the other isolates you. What most people never learn is that there is a third way, a way that feels like breathing clean air for the first time. Interdependence. Interdependence is the place where two whole people choose each other willingly, not out of fear, not out of obligation, not out of habit. It's a space where both lives remain intact, where your dreams don't shrink to fit someone else's comfort, and where his interests aren't threatened by your growth. It's not two halves becoming one. It's two full worlds overlapping, creating a shared universe without destroying the individual ones. But reaching this space requires one final transformation. one that many women resist because it feels almost too bold, too indulgent, too new. Nurturing your own life with the same devotion you once gave to everyone else. Think of your life as a garden. For years, maybe decades, you've tended someone else's soil. You watered his dreams, pruned his insecurities, removed the weeds from his past, stood guard over his emotional climate. You poured sunlight onto him even when you were withering. And while there is nothing wrong with loving deeply, the problem is that your own garden has been left to dry, its leaves curled, its soil cracked, its flowers waiting for a tenderness that never arrived. Nurturing your own garden doesn't mean abandoning the relationship. It means reclaiming the parts of you that make you vibrant, interesting, grounded, and alive. It means remembering that you had passions long before love arrived, and that those passions are the very things that give you color. And ironically, the more you pour into your own garden, the more expansive your love becomes. You stop loving from emptiness. You stop loving from fear. You stop loving from survival. Instead, you love from overflow. But to reach this place, you must confront something many women avoid: the guilt. The guilt of choosing yourself. The guilt of having needs. The guilt of taking time for rest, joy, creativity, solitude. The guilt that whispers, "You don't deserve this," or "He's more important," or "A good woman sacrifices." These messages didn't start with you. They were handed down through generations, taught by mothers who never had permission to choose themselves either. So the healing begins with giving yourself what the women before you could not claim. You start with one act of nourishment an hour. Alone, with a book, a quiet walk, a hobby revived, a dinner with friends you've been avoiding because you felt torn between your partner and your community. At first it feels strange. You might worry he'll feel neglected, or that you're doing something wrong. But over time, an unexpected warmth begins to return to your chest, the warmth of coming back to life. And as you do this, you begin to see your partner differently too. You start noticing whether he celebrates your growth or feels threatened by it. Whether he asks curious questions about your passions or quietly dismisses them. Whether he encourages your independence or subtly pulls you back when you step into your full height. These observations aren't judgments, they're information. They reveal the nature of the dynamic you're in and whether it can evolve with you. Healthy love doesn't shrink to maintain equilibrium, it expands. In an interdependent relationship, your joy adds to the partnership. Your friendships enrich it. Your interests enliven it. Your self-respect deepens it. Two adults carry the emotional weight together, not by dividing tasks rigidly, but by showing up with awareness, communication, and care. You stop mothering him. He stops leaning on you as if you're the emotional scaffolding of his existence. And the relationship becomes a dance instead of a burden. Of course, this shift can create friction. Anytime a woman stops over-functioning, the system around her wobbles. If you've been the one keeping the peace, managing the emotional labor, filling in the gaps, or rescuing him from his responsibilities, pulling back will create imbalance at first. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're no longer doing the job that should never have been yours. This is where clarity meets courage. You're not creating chaos. You're revealing it. You're not breaking the relationship. You're giving it a chance to become something healthier. And in that revelation, you learn something profound. Love doesn't thrive in fusion. Love thrives where two people can breathe. Interdependence is not soft. It's not fragile. It's not poetic idealism. It's practice. It's two people checking in, adjusting, communicating, growing. Not perfectly, but consciously. It's admitting when things feel uneven. It's taking responsibility for your part without carrying someone else's. It's allowing your partner to hold you without collapsing into him. It's showing up fully, not as a shadow, not as a caretaker, not as an anxious protector, but as a whole human being. The more you nurture your garden, the more you learn this truth. You were never meant to love from depletion. You were never meant to be the quiet one in the background of someone else's story. You were never meant to disappear so someone else could shine. You were meant to stand beside a partner, not behind him. You were meant to bring your full, vibrant, alive self into love. You were meant to be chosen as you are, not as the version of yourself you edited to keep the peace. And as you step into this way of loving, you discover something quietly revolutionary. The relationship you build after reclaiming yourself is always better, whether it is with the same partner or someone you have not met yet. Because a woman who no longer abandons herself doesn't choose out of fear anymore. She chooses out of truth. And truth always leads to love that can last. This is the final transformation, not loving him less, but loving yourself enough to finally love with freedom, depth, and integrity. You don't lose yourself in love anymore. You bring yourself to it. You expand inside it. And you grow a garden that feeds you every day of your life.